South Africa had the invitation. Macron gave it himself. Then it vanished. No explanation, no warning. And the moment Pretoria went public about why, all three parties started lying. Now, here is what South African presidency said in 2026. France had invited President Ramaphosa to the G7 summit in Evian, confirmed. Then, under what they called sustained pressure from the United States, France took it back. Their exact words: the Americans threatened to boycott the G7 if South Africa was invited. And then France said, we never made that call. Washington said, that never happened. South Africa's own president contradicted his own spokesperson on live television. Three different parties, three different stories. I'm going to walk you through every single layer of this. Because the real story didn't start in March 2026. It started years earlier. And by the end of this video, you would understand why that empty seat at the G7 was no accident. Now, the G7 is a closed room. 7 of the wealthiest countries on earth: the US, France, Germany, the UK, Japan, Italy, Canada. South Africa is not a member, but every single year, the host invites a few outsiders, which is a gesture of inclusion, a signal about who really matters. In 2025, Macron pulled Ramaphosa aside at the G20, a summit South Africa was hosting, and extended that personal invite to the 2026 G7 in Evian. Now, South Africa had been to the G7 before, Italy 2024. That counted. So this was real. It was confirmed. Ramaphosa was going. Then something changed. And to answer that, we need to go back, because Washington didn't just get up in 2026 and decided to punish South Africa. This was the end of a very long road, and that road has a name. 3 of them actually: Lady R, AGOA, Gaza. It's 2023. A Russian cargo ship called Lady R docks at Simon's naval base quietly at the night. He goes public. He accuses South Africa of secretly loading weapons on that ship and sending them to Russia, a country under full Western sanctions for invading Ukraine. Now, South Africa denies it, launched an inquiry, and went further to say no arms were transferred. But here is what you need to understand about geopolitics. It doesn't always matter what actually happened. What matters is what Washington now believed. And Washington now believed Pretoria was playing both sides. You see, trust in diplomacy is like a credit score. Once it drops, everything you do gets scrutinized differently. South Africa's credit score just got downgraded. And at this point of our story, we are barely in 2023. Now let's move to the next item: AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Now, this is the trade deal that gives African countries preferential access to the US market. Now, for South Africa, it's billions in exports. We're talking about cars, agriculture, manufactured goods. You lose AGOA, you feel it immediately. So that same year, senior US senators started making noise. They questioned whether South Africa deserved to keep its AGOA benefits. The accusation supporting Russia undermining Western sanctions. Brookings Institution analysis confirmed what Pretoria already knew. So Washington was now literally treating trade access as a lever. That's 2 pressure points in 1 year. But South Africa wasn't done making moves. Late 2023, South Africa does something almost no country on earth was prepared to do. It takes Israel to the International Court of Justice, accuses them of genocide in Gaza, Israel is America's closest Middle East ally. Filing that case at the World's top court is not a neutral act. It puts you directly against US foreign policy, publicly, legally, and permanently on the record. Washington's response? A bill in Congress calling for a formal review of US-South Africa relations. The language inside it was blunt. Pretoria was accused of having links with Hamas, Iran, of siding with what the bill called malign actors. Al Jazeera reported the full scope of it. So at this point, the file Washington had on Pretoria was thick, and it was about to get even thicker. February 2025, Trump returns to the White House. One of his early executive orders is specifically about South Africa. According to the Congressional Research Service, Executive Order 14204 accused Pretoria of egregious actions, pointing at land reform, black economic empowerment, and what it called South Africa's aggressive positions towards US allies. The order fast-tracked refugee status for Afrikaners, framing them as a persecuted group. Pretoria called it interference in their internal affairs. Carnegie Endowment for International Peace published a 2025 analysis. The title alone tells the story. US-South Africa relations are on the brink of collapse. Then when South Africa hosted the G20 2025, the US boycotted several lead-up events, sidelined Pretoria from key diplomatic moments, sent a message without saying a word. So when March 2026 arrives and France is drawing up the guest list, South Africa isn't just any country being considered or overlooked. Pretoria has become the most politically inconvenient African partner Washington has had in decades. Now, we are back in March 2026 and the story gets strange. France reschedules the G7 guest list. South Africa's name comes off it. Kenya goes on. South Africa's presidential spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, goes to AFP. He doesn't soften it. He says France withdrew the invitation under sustained pressure, and the reason? The Americans threatened to boycott the entire summit if Ramaphosa attended. A key G7 member, he said. You see, that quote travels fast. African news outlets run with it. Social media amplifies it. US pressure forces Ramaphosa out of G7. Trends across the continent. Then France responds. Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot denies everything. No US pressure, no diktat. France chose a streamlined G7 focused on geo-economic issues. Kenya was selected because of an oncoming France-Africa summit in Nairobi in May. Now, the White House, as you would expect, backs France's line. Washington did not ask Paris to drop South Africa. That's two denials. One seat still empty. But the most unexpected moment is still coming. Within 24 hours, Ramaphosa goes on live television himself. And he walks back every single thing his own spokesperson just said. He tells the BBC there was no pressure from the United States or any other country. Then he reminds the world that South Africa is not a G7 member, that its absence should not be seen as a snub. 3 countries, 3 contradictory accounts, 1 empty chair. Now, here is the question that should be nagging at you. If there was no pressure, why did Magwenya say there was? And if there was pressure, why did Ramaphosa fold so quickly? Now, there are 3 ways to read what just happened. None of them are flattering to anyone involved. 1. Washington quietly signaled to France, not in writing, not publicly, the kind of pressure that doesn't leave fingerprints. Something like, we would rather Ramaphosa not be in that room. France needing American cooperation on Ukraine, and broader geopolitics complied. Pretoria found out. Maguinha, frustrated, went to the press. This reading fits everything we have traced. Lady Aaron, AGOA, Gaza, the order 14204. Now, the pattern is there. Okay, for the second case, maybe Washington didn't need to say anything. France was already recalculating its Africa strategy. After being pushed out of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, Paris is betting heavily on East Africa. Now, Kenya is hosting a major France-Africa summit in May 2026. Inviting Nairobi to the G7 was a signal about where France sees its future on the continent. So, in this scenario, South Africa's exclusion becomes a byproduct, not a target. Now, for the third scenario, Ramaphosa and the BBC both hints at this. South Africa may have deliberately framed the story as US pressure for domestic consumption. Playing the victim of Western bullying lands well at home. It plays to constituencies that are pro-Palestine, skeptical of Washington, proud of South Africa's independent voice. But when it risked an actual rupture with Washington, with AGOA still hanging in the balance, Ramaphosa had to walk it back fast. Now, the honest answer is probably all three at once, and that combination tells you something that goes far beyond this summit. Whether or not Trump called Macron personally, the outcome was achieved. South Africa is out. The message was sent without a single written order. That's how modern geopolitical discipline works. It doesn't announce itself. It just happens. A cancelled invitation, a trade review, a visa compilation, a summit you used to attend that no longer needs you. Now, here is the piece most coverage skip entirely. Why Kenya? Kenya isn't just a neutral substitute. Kenya is that country that spent years building exactly the kind of relationship that Washington and Paris reward. Nairobi provides troops to UN peacekeeping missions in Somalia. It sent police to Haiti. It maintains quiet cooperative security ties with the West. Its foreign policy disagreements, and it has them, stay private. Its security cooperation is loud. So Kenya walked into the room South Africa just lost. And that creates a visible choice for every African government watching. Now, here is the uncomfortable part. Neither model is free. The South Africa path carries real economic exposure. AGOA uncertainty hits exporters directly. Losing summit access reduces diplomatic leverage. Western investments can slow. The Kenya path might cost something less visible but more permanent: your ability to represent the continent's actual interests at those tables, instead of the interest of whoever invited you. What Africa genuinely needs is the power to not have to choose. Real strategic autonomy, productive relationships with all major powers without the threat of punishment for independence. But the current global environment is moving in the opposite direction. The pressure to pick a side is growing louder. This is what it actually is. The G7 isn't just a summit, it's a test. And South Africa failed it not because of anything it did in March 2026, but because of the 3 years of accumulated foreign policy choices that Washington never forgave. The Congressional Research Service documented it plainly. US-South Africa relations have entered one of the most turbulent phases since the end of apartheid. That's not a small statement. And while Pretoria and Washington trade deals, the rest of the continent is watching carefully. Abuja is watching. Addis Ababa is watching. Accra watching. Every African capital is quietly doing the same calculation. What does independence actually cost in 2026? That's not just South Africa's question. It belongs to the whole continent. So the invitation was not really about the summit. It was a measurement, a quiet test of how far a country can walk its own path before the roads get closed. South Africa walked far enough to find out. Stop seeing this as a diplomatic embarrassment. Start seeing it as a manual, a detailed, real-world demonstration of how influence actually moves in the 21st century. Not through armies, not through sanctions, through guest lists, through trade reviews, through which country gets the phone call and which one gets the silence. That manual is now in circulation. Every foreign ministry on the continent has read it. And the calculation happening in those offices right now is not about justice or principle. It's about survival, what you can say publicly, what you must keep private, and exactly how much independence you can afford before someone adjusts your access. So this is the environment Africa is navigating, not the one in the speeches, the real one. And you watching this already understand something most people scrolling past the headlines do not. You understand that the real negotiations never make the news, that the most consequential decisions arrived with no announcements, that power at this level rarely raises its voice. It just moves the furniture. You see, this continent does not need a louder voice at a table built by others. It needs to stop asking for a seat and start owning the building.